What do you do when you wake up one day and realize every single person in your life knew a version of you that doesn't exist anymore? When the friendships you thought would last forever suddenly feel like wearing clothes that don't fit. You can't go back. So what do? I went to a wedding last month. My best friend from college. We'd been inseparable for 4 years, lived together senior year, talked every day. The kind of friendship where you just assume it'll last forever. But standing at that wedding, watching him celebrate this huge moment in his life, I felt nothing. Not sadness, not nostalgia, just this weird, hollow distance. Like I was watching a stranger's wedding. And that terrified me more than I wanted to admit. Because when did that happen? When did I outgrow someone I was sure I'd know forever? Here's the thing nobody warns you about growing up. You think you'll change together. You and your friends, moving through life at the same pace, evolving in parallel. Maybe you'll get different jobs, live in different cities, but fundamentally you'll still be the same people who connected years ago. That's the assumption. But it doesn't work that way. Growth isn't a group activity. And sometimes you wake up one day and realize you're not the same person anymore. And the people who knew the old you, they're still talking to a version of you that doesn't exist now. I started noticing it about a year ago. Small things at first. I'd meet up with old friends and the conversations felt recycled. Same complaints about the same jobs they'd been complaining about for 3 years. Same relationship drama with different names. Same weekend plans. Get drunk, recover, repeat. And I'd sit there trying to engage, trying to care, but I couldn't. Not because they were bad people, just because I'd moved past that version of life and they hadn't. The guilt hit me hard. Because what kind of person outgrows their friends? What kind of arrogant asshole sits there thinking, I've evolved and you haven't? I felt like a terrible person for even having those thoughts. So I tried harder, forced myself to show up, laughed at jokes that weren't funny anymore, pretended to care about drama that felt trivial, but pretending just made it worse. Because every conversation became a performance, and I'd drive home feeling more alone than if I'd stayed home in the first place. Then one night, one of my oldest friends called me, drunk, 2 a.m., crying about the same guy she'd been crying about for 6 months. And I remember sitting there with the phone to my ear, listening to her go through the same cycle. He's terrible, but maybe he'll change. But he won't, but what if he does? And I just couldn't anymore. I said, I love you, but I can't keep having this conversation. You know what you need to do. And until you do it, I don't think I can keep being your emotional support for a situation you're choosing to stay in. She hung up. We haven't talked since. And I waited for the guilt to crush me. Waited to feel like I'd done something unforgivable. But it never came. I just felt lighter. That's when I started paying attention, really paying attention, to who I was spending time with and why. And I realized something uncomfortable. Most of my relationships were built on who I used to be, not who I'd become. The friend group from high school? We had nothing in common anymore except shared history. The college crew? Same deal. We were bonded by nostalgia, not actual connection. And that realization was devastating, because it meant I was essentially alone. Not because I didn't have people, but because the people I had didn't know me anymore. And here's what made it worse. I couldn't even explain what had changed. It's not like I became a completely different person overnight. I didn't have some dramatic transformation. I just grew, started reading different books, thinking about different things, wanting different experiences. And slowly, the gap between who I was and who they thought I was got wider, until we were basically strangers using old nicknames. There's this thing that happens when you outgrow people. They sense it before you say anything. They feel the distance. And instead of asking what changed, they get defensive. Suddenly you're too busy, or acting different, or think you're better than everyone. And maybe part of that is true. Maybe I do think I'm on a better path. Not better than them as people, just better for me. But you can't say that, because the second you acknowledge the gap, you're the asshole. So you have two choices. Stay and shrink yourself to fit the old dynamic, or leave and accept that you'll be labeled as the one who changed, who abandoned people, who got too good for their roots. Neither option feels good, but one is honest. And I'd spent too many years being dishonest about who I was to keep doing it for the sake of keeping people comfortable. The hardest part wasn't cutting people off. It was accepting what that meant about me, because we're taught that good people maintain relationships, that loyalty means sticking around no matter what, that real friends grow together, not apart. So when you're the one walking away, when you're the one who outgrew the group, it feels like failure, like you did something wrong, like maybe you're the problem. But here's what I've learned after a year of sitting in this uncomfortable space. Outgrowing people doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who's actually growing. And growth, Real growth is always uncomfortable. It requires leaving things behind, old beliefs, old habits, and yeah, sometimes old people in relationships. Not because they're bad, not because they wronged you, just because you're going somewhere they're not going. And dragging them along doesn't help anyone. It just slows you down and makes them feel like a burden. The kindest thing you can do sometimes is let them stay where they are while you keep moving. In other words, just mind your own business. I'm not saying I have this figured out. I'm still learning how to navigate a life where my circle is smaller than it's ever been. Where Friday nights are quiet because I'd rather be alone than with people who don't know me anymore. Where I turn down invitations to things that used to excite me because they just don't anymore. And sometimes that feels lonely. But it's a different kind of lonely than being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. At least this loneliness is not fake. I wish someone had told me this years ago. You're allowed to outgrow people. You're allowed to change in ways that make old relationships obsolete. You're allowed to want different things, value different things, be different than you were. And the people who can't grow with you, you're allowed to love them from a distance. Or not love them at all anymore. Both are okay. Because the alternative, spending your life pretending to be someone you're not so other people feel comfortable, that's not loyalty. That's just slow erasure. And you've worked too hard to become who you are to give that up for people who only knew who you were. So if you're listening to this and feeling that same distance I felt at that wedding, if you're realizing you've outgrown everyone and don't know what to do about it, it's okay. You're not broken. You're not cold. You're not a bad friend. You're just someone who grew. And growth, by definition, means leaving some things behind. Even if those things are people you thought you'd know forever. That's not failure. That's just what happens when you refuse to stay small for someone else's comfort. And that's actually something to be proud of. If this resonated and you're tired of shrinking yourself to keep the peace, I made a video on how to stop being the nice guy everyone walks over. It's about building actual self-respect, not just talking about it. It should be on your screen right now. Have fun.